Harry.
Hello, Sebastian.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, so are the
That's good.
lights back or you don't have light?
Yeah, it came back not long ago, so I charged my phone small. Then
Okay,
I
okay,
still charge.
okay, okay. Um, the other Henry is also not available. I tried contacting him, but I'm sure that
Okay.
he will join maybe um in the process of the class. But as usual, I'm recording the slides, so um, yes. Okay, so
Okay.
today we'll be looking at cost management. We'll try and see if we can add stakeholder management to it. Per the
Okay.
knowledge areas, stakeholder management is the last knowledge area. But what we're going to do is that I want us to take cost management and then possibly take stakeholder management, okay? And
Okay.
that would leave us with procurement management, risk management, okay? Yes, yes, procurement, yes. So that is basically what we'll be left with. And we have 4 modules, right? 4 lesson process areas, knowledge areas to look at now. Because we've looked at quality management, resource management, and then communications management, right? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Yes. So that is basically what we are left with. So cost management. What are we going to look at today? We'll be looking at the definition according to PMI of what cost management is, the difference between cost estimation and then cost budgeting. Okay, once we are looking at the difference between them, that means that they are not the same. Estimating is not the same as budgeting, although they may be related. Then what do we mean by control account? Okay, then we'll look at the cost management processes and apply the technique called end value management to track project performance. You can clearly see here that once we are saying that we want to track project performance with that technique, then it is part of the control cost process group. It's a technique that is used there. Okay, then the other terminologies that we'll be looking at. Okay, so according to PMI, project cost management includes the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing, and controlling costs so that project can be completed within the approved budget. In the earlier stage of our meeting, we established that there are 6 main constraints. Okay, time is one, now called schedule. Cost is an example. Scope, quality. Okay, so these are the constraints that, by the definition of a constraint, you know how a constraint is. We don't have it in abundance and it tends to impact the project hardly. Okay, so looking at the cost management plan, what is it? Definitely within the plan cost process, would want to come out with a cost management plan, which is itself part of the project management plan. So ideally, we know that the cost management plan will cover all activities involved in ensuring that we perform the project within the stipulated budget. Okay, so it is concerned with the cost of the resources needed to complete project activities. It provides details on how to plan, manage, and control the project cost in relation to the cost baseline and manage the cost variances. I hope you are there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm following.
Good, good.
Yes, I'm here.
The cost management plan is a subsidiary of the project management plan, as I said earlier. The techniques involved in estimating the cost of each project activity is similar to the ones used in estimating project time. They are so related because you see, when we come out with the scope of the project and then we develop our work breakdown structure, okay, based on the work breakdown structure, we are able to estimate the duration of the activities, okay, which in turn will help us estimate the duration of the entire project. Now, from that work breakdown structure, we are also able to relate it with what we call the organizational breakdown structure or the project breakdown structure, where the last time we looked at the resource management, I don't know whether you were able to go through the entire resource management video or slide. We said that within the project team itself, we try to create an organogram for the project so that we'll know who is responsible for what, who reports to who and all that. So the same way when we create the WBS and also establish our organizational breakdown structure, we know which resources are going to be used for the project. The OBS is not the same as the RACI. The RACI is just trying to tell us who is responsible for what particular activity, who is supposed to be informed, who is supposed to be consulted, and who is actually accountable. Okay. Now, analogous estimating, bottom-up estimating, and reserve analysis are some of the techniques used in cost management. Okay, we all know that definitely you would have to involve somebody who has an expertise in project costing. Okay, there are some finance people who actually, we call it project finance, are specialized in project. Okay, and AAC is a certain body that tends to also give certification on cost professional. So we have the certified cost professional. They actually work on the principle of the total cost management, okay, to make sure that the project is carried out within the budget that we want to. So these are the aspects that you may need. As for analogous estimation, we all know that we're talking about historical data, right? A project, last 6 projects of such magnitude cost us this much. So we can envisage that this how much is going to cost us. When we acquired this tractor on the last 3 projects, this is how much we paid for renting it. And therefore, we estimate that this is how much you're going to pay. That's analogous. Now, of course, parametric estimating may also come in depending on, for instance, if you are hiring a tiler, you pay them according to per square foot of whatever they are doing. So that one too, you can do it. Then the bottom-up estimating, where we have the work breakdown structure, and then we cost from the bottom, okay, up. So we'll be looking at all that. What is reserve analysis? We try to, it is usually called the risk budget. In other words, we know that there are risks associated with the project that we're embarking on. In the last 3 projects that we performed, similar to this one, these were the risks that we encountered, right? And so we're going to make room for those risks, okay? So we call them the contingency reserves, okay? Whenever we are making room for risks that we are very familiar with, that can happen. We call that contingency reserves. However, there may be certain things that you never, assuming you were on a project and then your project was supposed to start from, let's say, 2019 and end on 2021, 3-year project. You and I know that by December of last year, you would never anticipate anything like coronavirus. Is that not it? Hello?
Yeah.
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 Coronavirus was never going to be a risk that you would plan for. And therefore, I'm sure that if there was any project like that, when they were planning for it, they never thought of it because they didn't know anything like that. But now it has come. So how are we going to confront this challenge? Especially when now it is going to force us to work from home and then have some of our team members probably being virtual and all that. So for such risk that we have no idea of, we make room for them by creating what we call the management reserve. Okay, the management reserve. The management reserve is never supposed to be touched. So the project manager can never touch the management reserve. If he has to touch it, then the sponsor must approve. It is until we have what we call the unknown unknowns. So the known unknowns are the contingency reserves, and the unknown unknowns are the management issues that we tend to consult our management uh, reserve. So note that it tends to happen, questions like that come in exams, okay? If it is something that was never planned for, you never envisaged it, then it means that you must consult your management reserve. But if it's something that you plan for, then you would have to use your contingency reserve. So we'll be looking at all that. Okay, so key concept. Project cost management is primarily concerned with the cost of the resources needed to complete the project activities. Cost management should consider the effect of project decisions on the subsequent recurring cost of using, maintaining, and supporting the product, service, or result of the project. Another aspect involves recognizing that different stakeholders measure project cost in different ways and at different times. Okay. If there's any part of the project that is also very vital, it's about cost, because this is what drives the entire project. You may determine the schedule, which in itself will tell how much, because if we're going to take, let's say, 3 years to do the project, it will definitely tell on the cost. You understand me? So we are saying here that, yes, if we want to manage the cost very well, then we must seriously engage and recognize the different perceptions of stakeholders as far as cost is concerned. Trends and emerging practices. Trends and emerging practices. Now, within the practice of project cost management, threats include expansion of end value management to include the concept of end schedule, which is ES. The ES theory replaces the schedule variance measures used in traditional end value management. So we know that end value minus planned value, okay, has been replaced with what ES and then what actual time, so that schedule variance SV is now ES minus AT. In the 5th edition of the PMBOK guide, I remember very well that the schedule variance, we're looking at, okay, we said that it was supposed to take us maybe this particular duration, 3 months to do this project, okay? And we should have covered this percentage within 1.5 months. So we should have in 50%, which is 1.5 months, done 50% of the work. You understand me? But in 1.5 months time, when we check, we realize that the work we have done is equivalent to just 1 month. So it means that there's a variance within the schedule. Schedule variance could be positive or negative. Okay. If the end value is more than the planned value, then it becomes positive. But if the planned value is more than the end value, it becomes negative, then it means that you are way behind. Okay, and we are saying that the trend now is that they replace schedule variance, which is this one, with ES minus AT. Okay, where ES is end schedule minus AT, which is what? Actual time. Now, schedule performance index, okay, using end schedule metrics is also used, okay, so that the schedule performance index is telling us how we are performing according to schedule, okay. So now we are dividing the end schedule over 80. Hitherto, it was not like that, but we'll go through the formulas in due course. What are the tailoring considerations? Okay, so we've seen that the way we manage knowledge, okay, differs from one organization to the other, okay. So with respect to money and then finance, how is it in your organization? Does the organization have a formal knowledge management and financial database repository that a project manager is required to use and that is readily accessible? Okay, if the company has it and it is readily accessible, that's good. You can go ahead to use it. Otherwise, if it means acquiring or doing something new, you can do that. Estimating and budgeting. Does the organization have existing formal or informal cost estimating and budgeting related policies, procedures, and guidelines? It depends on the organization. And value management. Does the organization use this technique in managing project? You may be a PMP, but your organization doesn't use end value management. And so you use what the organization uses. If you want them to embrace the concept of AVM, you may have to take it through the appropriate change management process as your organization prescribes. It's very important. The use of agile approach. Does the organization use agile methodologies in managing project? And if so, how does this impact cost estimating? So tailoring considerations are things that you look at while you are performing your project. And then governance. Does the organization have formal or informal audit and governance policies, procedures, and then guidelines? It's very important to know that, because within my organization, if we, the school, want to come out with any project, we would have to go through the engineering department or the engineering services. Those technical services guy would have to review everything and then give us approval before we can start the project. I remember there was a project that it was scheduled to take 3 months. And I remember at the time, I questioned whether it was actually going to take 3 months. Then, of course, with my knowledge in project management, and then, of course, as a project management professional, I knew that it was not going to be possible. As I talk to you now, the project started somewhere in 2017. Okay, it has still not been completed. In fact, just last week, the contractor was asked to go back and then remove the roofings. So it's going to cost another cost, right? It's going to cost another money. And it was simple. The right processes were not followed. Per the organization, you are supposed to go through these processes, but it wasn't done. Just because the person who was heading the school at the time had no knowledge of this, the organizational policies, okay, and then just went ahead, contracted somebody, and then they started. An engineering department stopped them. They came in, they did their checks. The iron rods that they were using were not the standard that the VRA wants. So these are the things that you need to look at, okay. Considerations for agile and adaptive environment. Now, projects with high degrees of uncertainty, or those where the scope is not yet fully defined, may not benefit from detailed cost calculations due to frequent changes. Okay, you are very much aware that you cannot have a detailed, complete budget, okay, for some of the project, especially within the agile world. Okay, so in that case, then we have to do the rolling wave planning, right? As we do the progressive elaboration. We plan, we cost for that one, and then we move forward to the next one. So that's how it was going to look at. So lightweight estimation methods can be used to generate a fast, high-level forecast of project labor cost, which can then easily be adjusted as changes arise. In cases where high variability projects are also subject to strict budget, the scope and schedule are more often adjusted to stay within cost constraint. Please note these considerations for agile and what adaptive environment. And like I said, you have taken 2 practice tests now, and you are familiar with the way the questions are. And I told you that the questions that you take in are standard PMI, PMP questions. So these tailoring considerations will help in a decision that you have to take. So for cost management, scope management, all the processes or the knowledge areas, please look at the considerations for agile and adaptive environment, and also the trends and emerging practices. Okay, the whole idea of control account, what is it? Now we are saying that in larger projects, costs are managed at a higher level rather than at an individual activity level. So the control account technique relates, that's this way. See, the related activities are grouped and their costs are managed as one unit. So let's look at this example here. Let's say this deliverable here, okay, is to maybe come out with the first phase, or maybe to come out with a KVIP or something. I mean, just any deliverable at all. But there are other deliverables within the project. It's a very complex project. Maybe you are developing the entire Zongo community. Okay, so under this particular deliverable, we decompose them into their various work packages, which in turn have their activities, like you can see here. Now, so the control account is set to this point that this particular money or account is for all that we have here. Henry, do you get it here?
Yes, I get it.
Yes, so that is the control account. That is why, so it also help in what we call, like its name, for tracking the progress as far as finances is concerned. Do you get it? So here the scope of a project is decomposed through a WBS. Now the lowest level deliverable in the WBS is the, but that is a hint for us to, anyway. So that is basically the, so if we take the other deliverables here, if there's another deliverable, okay, we're going to lump all that together and have their control account. So that is it. Related activities are grouped and their costs are managed as one unit. That is what we call control account. Okay, cost management processes. What are they? There's no process in the initiating phase. Okay, there's no process in the initiating phase. Even though with the, how do you call it? Project charter, during the initiating phase, we would have done what we call the benefit to cost analysis, the net present value of all that. We don't manage cost, okay, at the initiating phase. Let's look at it carefully. So the initiating process group doesn't have that. How many processes are within the planning process group? There are 3, right? We plan cost management, we estimate cost, and determine budget. Now, in execution, okay, in execution, if there was any process that we're going to put there, then probably to be spend the money. You understand? But there's no process in the execution stage regarding cost management. Rather, while we are executing, will control, is that not it? So while we are spending on the project, we're going to control the costs. So there are how many processes in here? 4. Plan cost management, estimate cost, determine budget, and then control cost. Okay, so looking at the broader picture here, we have looked at integration management, we have looked at scope management, we've done schedule management. Okay, we are on cost management, but we have tackled quality management, resource management, and communications. So today, if we're able to handle cost management and then stakeholder management, then next week we only have risk management and procurement management, and then we are within our schedule. What I will even do is that I may try as much as possible to do a recording of the risk management and then the procurement management and let you have it. Okay, so once you have it, next week when we meet, it is going to be more of tutorials. Okay, how are we going to approach the questions and all that? Henry, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that would be better. That would be better. So let's try and then keep up to that. Okay, I'm trying to move fast today just because of the fact that we want to cover what we could have covered within that 1 hour that we lost. Now, this is just the processes in proper order so that at least you can see it well. So the coloring shows that all of them are within the planning stage, and then the green here is the monitoring and control. That's just a color code. Okay, plan cost management. It is the process of defining how the project cost will be estimated, budgeted, managed, monitored, and controlled. Now, as we go through the processes here, I want you to know one thing. Our objective was to know the difference between estimation and budgeting. So at the end of the lesson, you should ask yourself, in case I'm asked to differentiate between the two, will I be able to do that? In some cases, it is so clear that the facilitator will present a slide on difference between estimation and budgeting. But in some cases, the student or the learner must capture it or be able to realize it from the explanation, okay? And at our level of learning, the latter is what we're going to look at. I'm not going to directly state the difference between the two, but you capture it and then already you owe me an assignment. Henry, you owe me an assignment. The schedule management.
Really?
Yeah, I just remembered. You owe me the schedule management assignment. So what I'll do is that after the class, I'll take you back to that one and then make sure I get the latest by Tuesday, okay?
Okay, sure. After.
Okay, so I know you are very busy. You're very busy, I can see, but let's try and then kill it, because I've seen that people who are taking the PMP in recent times are passing, seriously speaking. So just take advantage of it. And I have this thing, you see, when you apply, there's a tendency you'll be asked to go ahead to write without going through that auditing process, because they know very well that if December passes, we are going to January, and then of course the whole syllabus is going to change. So I am sure they are going to be a bit liberal with those of you who are going to schedule or register within December. So let's take advantage of that. So what goes into the plan cost management? Now we'll need a project charter. Remember that license to use resources that gives birth to the project's birth certificate, as it may be called. Okay, it has the contractual agreement, all those terms and all that in there. Okay, the business case and all that. So we need a project charter. We need a project management plan, because we'll have the scope management plan in there. We'll have the schedule management plan in there. We'll have the resource management plan in there. These are three key plans that we will need, right, when we are estimating or budgeting. Okay, enterprise environmental factors. Okay, so long as cost is concerned, you know that within your industry and then within the organization, there's a way and that we do these things. There are certain things that affect what we are doing. So we're going to look at all these as we are planning the cost. So these things will go into them. Then the OPAs, okay, there are procedures, standards, and then other softwares that you may use to do the costing. Now, what are the tools and then the techniques here? Definitely, you're going to engage yourself in some meetings. Okay, there's data for analysis. You're going to do the analysis of the data, and then there's what expert judgment, which is always important. Okay, now you see that there's only one output, and that is the cost management plan. So once we are planning cost management, we are coming out with only one output and document, which is the cost management plan. Now, I've taken my time to look at the things that go into the cost management plan for the sake of exams. One of the things I've noticed about the exams is that you need to read wide. Seriously speaking, you need to read wide. There are some questions that come that may not even be in the PMBOK. But if you look at their manual, there's a particular name they call it for the PMP exam. Okay, there's a certain brochure for it. When you read it, they will tell you that beside the PMBOK 6, consult other books, and sometimes they've stated those books there. So the questions are not limited to the PMBOK 6 alone. Now, the plan contains policies, procedures, and frameworks as to how project costs will be managed and controlled. So typically it will include unit of measure. Are we measuring in days? Are we measuring in hours? Are we measuring in months or weeks? It has to be a standard. We need to agree on it. Okay. If in terms of some roads or some distances, are we going to use kilometers? So that if we agree that we are using kilometers and somebody write 5 to represent a certain length and does not bring kilometers or even makes a mistake and write meters, because we have agreed, you know, when you are gathering data, we have what we call missing elements, and then sometimes the person is writing meter cube and write M3. All these things, some of the data you just reject because they are just absolutely wrong. but some too, you see that it was just a typo. So here, when we define what we're going to use as unit of measure, we are all on the same page and calculation becomes very easy. Now, levels of precision. You see, if you have, let's say, 100.49, are we going to round off to the nearest whole number? Now, if you are rounding off to the nearest whole number, are we going to ignore the 49 and round it down to 100, or we can take it to 101? Either ways have to be agreed. The reason is that when you take 100.49, which is around 100.5, now that 0.5 is midway between 0 and 1. And so in some environment, they use the rounding down approach. So 5, if it is up to 5, they round down, so it becomes 100. In some cases, if it is 0. For instance, in Ghana, if you have something like 100.5, you can take it to what? 101. That is what we usually do. So these things should be looked at. Then control thresholds. What amount of variation should we take action? We know very well that we cannot say we are spending exactly as the budget says. So we can leave some room that if we see that the variance in the cost has reached this particular level, we have to take action. Okay, so while we are doing the monitoring and evaluation, if we see that the variance is $40,000, for example, then quickly we must take action to do the corrective action, as we usually call it. Okay, so those are the control thresholds. Then rules of performance measurement. This is where we either use the EVM technique or the percentage completion method for the activities. So it will be established in the cost management plan. Reporting format. Now, how are you going to report it? And then what is the frequency for the report? Should it be every week? Should it be every day? Should it be every 2 weeks? It has to be decided. Then additional details like strategic funding choices. There are some cases where maybe we would have to look elsewhere for money. Okay, we would have to look at that. That when it becomes critical, we would have to fall on such and such for money. Then cost recording procedure. How are we going to record and all that? All these things are part, so let's take note of that. Now, the concept of life cycle costing, even though we come across this in the types of cost, whenever we are running project, there are instances where we would have to acquire certain resources. Either we hire them or we buy them. Now, in buying them, we may, depending on the quality level, for instance, in this particular case, the same product has a low quality level, and then the other has a high quality level. Here, the quality is in terms of the grade, not the fitness for purpose. As far as fitness for purpose is concerned, the two of them perform the same function. So you're going to do the same thing. But just that one has a lower quality, that is great, than the other. In other words, maybe one is new and one is used. Let's put it that way. Okay. So we are saying that if this product cost $80 in purchasing, and this one cost $100, you may want to look at the $20 and say that you are gaining $20 because of how much it cost. Okay, so to you, you may be financially prudent in here. But then let's look at the maintenance cost after the project is completed, because sometimes the product may have to stay within the organization. If we're going to buy this thing at $80 and rather we'll spend $40 maintaining it, Then the life cycle cost, which is the total cost. Okay, so we say that life cycle cost looks at the cost of the whole life of the product, not just the product, the cost of the product in the project. When you even do it, in fact, life cycle costing even comes in when you want to come out with something. If we're going to do it and we're going to spend this amount of money in maintaining it, then we're going to say that, okay, now let me give you a typical example. Somebody dashes you a car. Okay, so you go to the market and you buy this second-hand car from a friend. So he gave you the car at maybe 20,000 Ghana cedis. In fact, if you had purchased that car, it would have cost you maybe 50,000 Ghana cedis. We are just making an assumption here. Now, the life cycle cost is going to be the cost of that old used car plus the maintenance. Maybe every 2 weeks you have to go and service the car because you have to check the plugs and all those things. If you take 3 years, the amount of money probably you spent on this old car will even be more than the new one that you bought. Okay, if you had bought the new one within the same 3 years. So that is the life cycle costing. So if you look at what we have now, the total cost is 120. But if we had purchased the one at 100, the maintenance cost is just 10 Ghana cedis or $10. We put it together, that is 110. You see? So
Yeah.
it is, yes.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah. So with scenarios like this,
yeah.
would the questions be geared towards like a specific process, like a quality management? Because if you are saying cost management
Mm-hmm.
and say even the high quality product, say it was $100, but the maintenance was even higher than the low one per se. Would
Mm-hmm.
the questions be geared towards, okay, regarding cost management, what would the project manager do? Would you
No,
go
no, no,
for
no,
the
no. You are expecting that the project will tell you that what would regarding cost management, so that your mind will go to cost management. Is that not it?
yes, but
Exactly.
it can
But
be on quality, it could be on procurement. So how would it
exactly,
be like?
it will never tell you. It will only ask you that as a project manager, which of these would you recommend or choose? Okay, it will give you something like this. It can give you a data like this, sometimes a table like this, and tell you that which of these will you purchase or take. You understand? So we see here that if we buy the low grade one, we will save $20. Is that not it? But then what will happen is that there's an overall $10 additional cost. So if we compare the two, then you'd rather choose this one. So it is a decision-making thing. So this one, you should know that as a PM, you're going to make decisions, okay? And the decisions that you're going to make depends on your knowledge of cost management, quality management, stakeholder engagement. So put it this way, I am going to make decisions as a project manager, but the decision that I will make depends on my knowledge of the 10 knowledge areas, and then also the responsibility, and then what? Ethics. Questions don't usually tell you, unless maybe they will tell you that some cases they will tell you you are in the um, define activities stage. What is your next process? Then that one, you would have to know that define activities is within this particular knowledge area. Do you get the point here?
Get it?
Aha. So they usually, in fact, a question like this may even be related to risk management, which we'll look at it when you use what we call the decision tree. Okay. But yours is to know the decision that you're going to take based on the knowledge areas. That's what I can tell you. Based on the knowledge areas. Based on the knowledge areas. As we go through the tutorials next week, God willing, you'll see more of those questions and how we'll approach them. Okay. Now let's look at this other tool, which is value analysis. What is value analysis? You see that if you go back, it is all about what? Decision making, finding less costly way of doing the same work. Here, we are not reducing the scope or the quality of the thing, just that you, let's say Henry, you are a supplier, okay? And then there's also another supplier. You are giving me the same thing, but Henry is giving it to me at a lower price. Definitely, I would go for yours. Is that not it? Do you get a point here? Hello, are you there? Hello?
Yes, I'm here. I'm fine.
Yes, yes. I'm saying that value analysis or value engineering is also a technique. What does it do? It helps us find, or is the process of finding less costly way of the same work. So if a team is decreasing cost with the same scope, they are performing what? Value analysis. It should be noted that when we are doing value analysis, we are not descoping. We are just looking for the most cost-effective way of doing the same thing. I hope you get it. We do it in everyday life. I mean, you want to run a program, you want to look at getting the same thing, but at a reduced cost. So a typical example is this one. You need 5,000 meter cube of wood for your construction project. You don't need all of them at the same time, but you need, let's say, 2,500 in the beginning, and then 3 months later, you go for the next 2,500. But you know that like we said, cost of items are always related to time. In special cases, a promo runs. Now, the wood supplier is saying that he will give you 25% discount if you buy all of the wood as a bulk. So you decide to buy all the wood you need in your project. The reason is simple. What informed this choice is that if I buy this 2,500 meter cube at whatever amount that it is, I expect that the next 2,500 would be the same if I'm buying it today. But in 3 months, it would have increased. You get the point here. So to save, I would want to buy all the 5,000 because of the discount that I'm going to enjoy. But note that you don't just do this by looking at the discount. You're also going to look at the item that you're going to purchase. Is it one that perishes? If it perishes over time and you buy it in bulk, then you are going to lose if you don't have proper storage. You get the point here? Good. So you are going to look at all these scenarios, okay, before you come out to say that, okay, if that is the case, I am going to buy this. So that is value engineering, value analysis. Finding less costly way of doing the same work. And as a project manager, you are expected to be cost effective. Okay, you are expected to be cost effective. A question like this may come, but be very careful when you are choosing an answer, because sometimes it will not be wise for you to buy everything at a go. Henry, do you get what I'm trying to say? Even though there's a discount. Exactly. So you have to look at the scenario. Okay. Now, There are these types of costs that we want to look at. One of which we have looked at earlier, which is the how do you call it? The life cycle cost. Okay, we have the variable cost, the tangible or tangible cost or benefit, the intangible cost, the fixed, the direct, and then indirect cost, and then we have the sunk cost. I'm sure that in your MS program you did some finance there, so this one we're not going so much into it. But what is important is that you know the difference. Variable costs tend to change with amount of production or time, especially within the project. So the cost of labor may change and wages may fluctuate. In other words, they are not fixed. Okay, materials may also change. Even with cement, you can purchase cement today at 224 or 40 cedis per bag, but then in the next 3 days you go, it has changed. Then we have tangible cost. Okay, those costs or benefits that an organization can easily measure in cedis or dollars. Then there are those that we cannot see, like goodwill, prestige, and then brand. Why are we doing this project? We may not get the tangible result or benefit as in cash or dollars, right? But then it's going to give us a good corporate image, and therefore it is important for us to do it. Fixed cost. They don't change as the production changes over the cycle of the project. Rental cost and then the setup cost are examples. Direct costs are those directly attributable to the work on the project, like the wages and then the materials. These are direct costs. So it can be a direct cost, but it may be a variable cost at the same time, like wages. Have you seen it here? And materials. Okay. Then indirect costs are costs that are not actually associated with the project, but things around the project. So overhead items or costs incurred for the benefit of more than one project. In fact, maybe before you do the project, there are some monies that you have to pay and all those things. Those taxes and all security of the company and those things, you don't add them. Okay, those are the indirect costs. Then we have what we call the sunk cost. Now, money that has been spent in the past, especially when deciding that the project has to be done or not, that is what we call the sunk cost. And whenever you are costing, you don't add the sunk cost. So you are building a house, and then maybe at a certain point, there were some litigations and you had to go and then settle some people. Now, yeah, if you are selling the house, you cannot add that money to it and say that it is the cost of the house. Okay. Or before you built, you have to go and see some people, certain people have to be sorted and all that before. No, you can't add that. That is a sunk cost. Okay. So be very careful of sunk cost while you are costing on your project. There's this thing that we call the learning curve theory. Okay. Anything that you are not so familiar with, when you start doing it, it becomes difficult. But with time, it becomes easier. And then the time spent in doing it reduces. Sometimes when you are going to a place for the first time, it looks very far. And when you get there, you are coming back, it's very short. It's because a certain learning curve has been built. So it says that when many items are produced repeatedly, the unit cost of those items decreases in a regular pattern as more units are produced. When we are producing the first one, because we didn't know so much about it, and there were certain mistakes that were made, certain defects and all that. And so we had to incur so much. But with time, as we produce, you see that we know so much about it and we don't spend so much. Then reserves. We have talked about reserves. I think in the openings, we talked about reserve analysis. So all the buffers in terms of cedis or dollars that we tend to add, okay, in order to take care of the risk. okay, is what we call as the reserves. And I said that we have the contingency reserves, which are the known unknowns. And then we have the management reserves, okay, which allow for future situations that are unpredictable. And we call them unknown unknowns, okay. It should be noted here that we are saying that contingency reserves are the budget within the cost baseline. We'll talk about the cost baseline very soon, okay. It's just telling us that we can only spend to this particular point as far as this project is concerned. So we have baseline the cost, nothing more. You understand? Plus or minus this particular maybe a allowance. So that is the cost baseline. Okay. And the cost baseline usually looks like an S, which we'll look at later. So that is it. The management reserves are not part of the cost baseline. No. We usually put the management reserve on top. Okay. After we've done everything, including the contingency reserve, then we put the management reserve on top. Okay. So usually it's on top of the cost baseline. Estimate cost. How do we estimate cost? It is the process of developing an appropriate or an approximation of the monetary value of the resources needed to complete the project work. It belongs to the planning process group. Now, remember the first process in the cost management was what? To plan cost management. Once we plan cost management, the next thing is to do what? To estimate the cost. Okay, so we are on the second process, which is estimate cost. We are saying that is the process of developing an approximation of the monetary value of the resources needed to complete the project work. Okay, now estimates for each activity are done. It determines the amount of cost required to complete the project work. Costs are estimated for all resources that will be charged for the product and for the project. So we look at labor, materials, equipment, contingency, etc. Now, estimation or estimating cost is just similar to the type of estimation that is done in schedule management. Very, very similar. Okay. We should note that estimation should be based on the WBS to improve accuracy. If we are estimating, we need to use the WBS. Now, estimation of an activity should be done by the person doing the work. Here, it is very critical to note that because he knows what goes into the work. Okay, he knows what goes into the work. Historical information from past projects is key. Cost baseline should be taken in the beginning, and we shouldn't expect that it will change. Well, so long as we baseline it. So usually the integrated change control and all that is to ensure that the performance baseline is not changed, tampered with. Typically, the scope baseline, the schedule baseline, and then the cost baseline. Okay. Now, however, if there should be anything like change, they should be requested through the appropriate change processes when problems occur. The project manager may periodically recalculate the estimate to complete. So we have done 60% of the work. If we have done 60% of the work, as far as the cost is concerned, we should have spent 60% of the money, all things being equal. So now, how much do I have to finish the project? That is what we call the estimate to complete. How much must I spend to finish the project? If you do that on a regular basis, what happens is that you are able to quickly take action when it is supposed to, when it's necessary. Otherwise, if you wait till certain last minute, Then um, your project may be running red, as in over budget, and certain appropriate measures were supposed to be taken ahead of time or earlier, but you did not. And now you find yourself in that serious situation. So it's always important to recalculate and then um, based on what actually has happened. You get it. Sometimes because we didn't know so much about the project, we made some calculations to estimate that. But as we continue, based on what the scenarios and all that has happened, some recalculations have to be done. Now, it is also important to meet the any agreed upon estimate. What are the tools and then the techniques in here, and then the input and the output? So if we're going to estimate cost, we need to, first of all, have a project management plan, the project document, okay, organizational process, factors, asset, and then environmental, enterprise environmental factors. All these are input to cost estimation. What are the tools and techniques? We need expert judgment, parametric estimation, 3-point estimation, which we talked about some time ago, the most likely, the optimistic, and then what? The pessimistic, right? The analogous estimating, the project management information system, data analysis, decision making, okay, which we looked at earlier. What decision are you going to make? And then bottom-up estimating. So all these are tools and techniques that you're going to use. These will be used based on the complexity of the project, okay? But you cannot estimate cost without referring to your schedule management plan, the scope management plan, and then the resource management plan. That is how come these are important. You also need a work breakdown structure dictionary, okay, or the WBS itself to be able to do that. So all these documents are necessary. Now, what are the output? Once we estimate cost, the first output here is the inverse of the name, is cost estimates. The basis on which you made your estimate should be there. And then the update of the word project document. Okay, so these are the outputs. So if a question is asking you that you are the project manager, and then 2 members within your team are arguing over the output of the estimate cost process. One member is saying that maybe cost estimate is part. What are you going to say as a PM? Is it true? It's not true. So these are some of the questions that you'll be asked relating to some of these. And that one, it's straightforward. It means that you need to know this by heart. By the way, have you started memorizing the knowledge areas and then the process groups with the active processes, the 49 processes?
Yeah, I have.
You have. So now
I
you can
started
write.
memorizing it.
Now you can do it, and you can write everything on paper.
I can write up to resource management.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Continue. And with time, you will just you see that you know it by heart. You know it by heart. Even if you can decide to draw something like this one, okay, you can do that. I mean, or what is important is that you know it by heart. Now, we talked about what cost estimation here, and we just want to look at some things about cost estimation. The entire exams is not just about these ones. What do we mean by bottom-up estimation? What do we mean by certain things? So that's what we're going to look at here. It is important to know the types of cost estimate and the levels of accuracy associated with them. Bad estimate will definitely lead to unrealistic budget, which might cause cost overruns and unnecessary variations. Okay. The first thing that we're going to look at here is the tools and techniques for this question. The analogous or the top-down estimate. So anytime you come across a top-down estimate, you should know that we are talking about analogous. And what is that? Use the actual cost of a previous similar project as the basis for estimating the cost of the current project. And you know that usually when we have the high level costing, that is to say that we just want to quickly give an estimation of how much it will cost. And when we are relating or communicating with top management, we tend to use this one, the top-down estimate, because they just want something, they are going to a meeting and then they just want to have a fair idea. It's not that you want to tell them to give you some weeks to develop your WBS and then use the bottom-up estimate. Okay, so if a question asks you which of these tools will you use, there is a meeting, your top management has just called you right now to give, and which one will you use? That is, you see how the question is here. You have the top management have a meeting, there's a management meeting, and then they call you to tell them how much the project is going to cost. You don't have to tell them to give you days to do that. If they are saying they need it now, then what you just need to do is to use the analogous estimate. Then we have the bottom up, which we talked about. It involves estimating individual work items or activities and summing them up to get a project total. Between the two of them, we know very well that the bottom-up estimate is very, very reliable. Okay, it's very, very reliable. Why? Even though this project that we are doing now is similar to past 3 projects, the conditions may not be the same. And therefore, we would not have a proper estimation which is so accurate. It will only guide us, because some resources may not be available. Maybe they've moved to other departments, or maybe they've even left the organization. Okay, and their availability made the duration of the project the way it was and how much it cost. Now there's somebody who is not experienced and is going to be on the team, and so he may affect the project. So that is what we should look at. Parametric modeling, we've talked about parametric estimation, and then 3-point estimate. Types of cost estimate. Rough order of magnitude, which we usually call ROM. Budgetary and definitive. When do we use them, and why do we use them, and how accurate? Please look at this side. These figures appear in the exams. Okay, this is what 75% accurate, is that not it? Let's look at something here. Very early in the project life cycle, often 3 to 5 years before the project is completed, depending on the project anyway, if that's for a bigger project. Why is it that it provides what rough ballpark of the cost for selection decisions? Okay, so we are saying that it is accurate to about 75%, but minus 25%. Then we have the budgetary. When do we use it? We use it early. That is when the project is 1 to 2 years out. So we put dollars in the plans here. So we are looking at minus 10% plus 25%. Then we use the definitive, which is later in the project, that is less than 1 year out. Provides details for purchases, estimate actual cost, and we have minus 5% plus what 10%. So we're going to look at these okay, in the objectives, okay, how accurate is the rough order? They usually give you the margin. So for rough order of estimate, it is this. For budgetary, it is this one. For definitive, it is -5% to what, plus 10%. This is just an example that I just showed, want to show you. Okay, I just got it somewhere. So this example of a cost estimate, you see, these are the WBS items. We have looked at a unit. Remember, we said that the cost management plan will contain the unit and all that. So cost unit, you see, and then the subtotals. Okay, so the project manager, how many hours is he going to work? 960 hours. How much is an hour? 100. For every 1 hour that the project manager works, we give him $100. So in that case, for 960, it will be what? 96,000. I hope you get it here. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm following.
Yeah, so that is it. Okay, so that's just it. I know that once you get involved with project yourself, you may be familiar with these. Okay, I always say that this is not a typical project management class. This is the professional exams. So it is taking that you have a fair idea of what project management is. You've done it for the past 4 years. Okay, and so you know what we're talking about here. Okay, now how do we determine the budget? So you see, the process of aggregating the estimated cost of individual activities or work packages to establish an authorized cost baseline. Now, we are saying that the baseline includes all authorized budget, but excludes what? Management reserves. So I'm sure now we are getting close to the difference between estimation and then what? Budgeting. So now we come in here. What are the inputs to determine budget? We have the project management plan, the project document, we have the business document, the agreement, and then we have the enterprise environmental factors, then the OPAs. Okay. Then what are the tools and techniques? Historical information review, which is typically looking at past project and how much they cost and all that. Then we have the expert judgment. Okay, maybe the certified cost professional will come in here to help us in that. Then cost aggregation. Remember, we said that the process of aggregating the estimated cost. Okay, so when it gets to this one, the estimates, you see that we're just taking each one of them, each component, and we're trying to find out how much it is. Now, when at that stage, we don't know how much this particular one or this, the entire project will cost, okay? It is when we aggregate them, then we can say that, okay, we're going to spend such and such within this period, spend such and such within that period. Okay, so that is it. Now, funding limit reconciliation. What is it about? The cost aggregation is when you pick it from, excuse me, the bottom up, okay, using your work breakdown structure. What is funding limit reconciliation? Let me take it that when you, as a student, okay, you are in school and then you have your parents taking care of you. You know that when you go to school, they usually give you your pocket money. As in, maybe you take this within maybe middle of the semester, you're going to be given a certain amount of money. Is that not it? And so while you are spending, if it's about getting to the point where nothing is in your pocket, you call your parents to let you have the money. You don't want to call your parents every day for money. So with funding limit reconciliation, what we're doing here is that we know that this project is going to cost this much. Within the first maybe 3 months, this is how much we're going to spend on the project. So management gives you the funds for that. As you're approaching the third month, you know that, okay, you should be giving a certain amount that would take you to maybe um, the 7th or 8th month. And then the money is given so that you spend like that. They wouldn't give you the entire money for you to spend for control purposes. They would give you according to these funding limits. You get it now. So it all depends on your organization. If you realize that the organization is flexible, then you can come out with your own funding limit. As far as your organization is concerned, you sit together and then decide that if the organization tends to be more bureaucratic, then you should also know how you're going to do this funding limit. Else, it may impact the cost of the project. Because at a certain point where you need to pay for something or pay a certain labor, and then the money is not available, it's going to um, cost you a lot in terms of the reputation, in terms of even the materials. If you're supposed to purchase this within this period and you're not getting it, if it delays, remember, the longer it delays in the market, prices do change. So that is the funding limit reconciliation we're talking about here. Then financing. The difference between accounting and finance is that accounting is just about bookkeeping, right? And then financing is when you're trying to make decisions out of what has been given. That's the basic knowledge. So we're going to use these techniques and tools, okay, in determining the budget. Now, when we determine the budget, what is the output? The first thing we have to look at is that we come out with what we call the cost baseline. The cost baseline, which is part of the PMB, the performance measurement baseline. So we're going to be judged or measured based on this cost baseline. Then we have the project funding requirement. What are the requirements as far as funding of the project is concerned? Because now we've been able to come out with the budget, you understand? And then we're going to be giving this based on, especially with this limit reconciliation that you've come up here, then they will know how you're going to release funds for the project. Will it be prudent for you to wait till the entire fund for a particular phase is done before you write? No. Once you are spending, you should know, you understand, that at this particular point, when I write, I'm going to get the money within this duration, so that every point in time, you have funding for that particular phase that you're doing. So we're going to have project document update, okay? And it's clear here that an understanding of how to determine a project budget is important for you in the exams. Will you be asked to determine a budget? No. You get the point here. You're not going to determine it there. But how you're going to come about and the decisions that you'll be making is what we're going to look at. So we're looking at the techniques one after the other. Cost aggregation. So this one example. So you see, we have the activities here and we have the estimated cost. And we are saying that within week 1, this is how much we're going to spend, right? Now, week 2, we're going to spend what? 1,500. Week 3, we're going to spend this. Week 4, we're going to spend that. Now, with our descriptive narrative, which is estimated at $6,000, we're going to spend $2,000 across week 2 and then week 4. Then add binder, index, and format. That is $1,000. And that is only going to be spent around what? The 4th week. Okay, the 4th week. So then how are you going to do that? We're going to do the weekly cost. So with week 1, we know we're going to spend $2,000. By the 3rd week, this is cumulative in nature. By the 3rd week, how much would you have spent? If you look at the 2nd week, you are spending this much. Is that not it? Then the 3rd week, this is how much you're spending. The 4th week. But when we want to look at the cumulative one, week 1 is 2,000. We have to add week 2 to it. So if you are the project manager for this, if it is going to take, let's say, 4 weeks, you can ask them to give you $5,500 to start with. Why? Well, you know that $5,500 will take you for the first 2 weeks. Do you get it? Then while you are approaching the end, you may write so that they give you the remaining. Okay? That is exactly how you do it for funding limit requirement. But here, you are not doing the funding limit requirement. You are only aggregating the cost. Do you get it here? So now you know that the total estimate is what? 17,000. So that is cost aggregation. Okay? When you look at it in terms of work package, that's how it looks like, the WBS. So you see, these are the activity estimates. So for each one, so this one, A1 costs this, A2 costs this, A3 costs that. Now, from A1 to A4, that goes to work package 1. Work package 2 costs this amount. Work package 3 costs this, work package 4 costs that. Okay? So you add in all of them and then you are taking them up. That is why we call it the bottom-up estimation. And you see, the first on the floor here will be the activity estimate. Please study this diagram carefully. Excuse me. The first one is your activity estimate. Then we have the work package estimate. Control account is usually set at the work head on top of a particular work package. You remember when we're looking at the concept of control account, it was placed on top of the work packages under the particular deliverable. So as we climb up, we move from activity estimate to work package estimate to control account estimate, then project estimate, because it is usually related to deliverables as far as control account are concerned. But when we go to project estimate, then you see now we have, if you look at the diagram carefully, look at this, we have control account 1 for a particular deliverable and network packages, and then control account 2 for another deliverable with it work packages. But all these will go into the project itself, right? And the project itself now is going to cost us $1,250. So this is the project estimate. Now, I said that the contingency reserve is always on top of the project estimate. So you see, we have put the contingency reserve on top. So we are saying that $105 is going to be set aside for risk or uncertainties that we are very familiar with. Now, when we add this to this one, that will take us to 1,355. That will tell us that the entire project will cost around 1,335, basically. However, because of the fact that there are circumstances like coronavirus that we never anticipated, which are the unknown unknowns, we're going to make a management reserve of $68, so that when coronavirus comes, we didn't know it will come, it has come, then this management reserve is going to be. So when we lump everything together, then we are saying that the entire thing is what? 1,423. Which of these does the how much of this does the project manager have control over? The project manager has control over only this part. Let me highlight for you to see. You have control up to this point. Because you can never touch the management reserve. You cannot, unless it happens. And then, so if it doesn't happen, the management reserve goes back to the treasury. So let's go back. Does it make, is it clear to you, Henry? Hello, Henry, are you there?
Makes sense.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I'm saying it makes sense. It's clear.
Good, good, good. It's good that it makes sense to you so that we can. Good. So reserve analysis. I've talked about reserve analysis, and so we don't really have to. We talked about contingency and then management reserves. Okay. So let's when you get the slides, you just go through. So this is just an example. Okay. How are you going to do that? There's no defined way of doing it. It depends on where you are. But the guiding principle is what I want us to look at here. This is the guiding principle. Okay, the guiding principle when you are trying to do reserve analysis. My interest has always been that I don't want the students to go to the room and then it's found wanting. And so I know when you go back to your slide, you will not see these there. Okay. And the other thing is that when we give you the slides, sometimes you don't want to come for lectures. So I've decided that I'll give you the updated version of it for next week. When we are done, I give it to you. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
But
please. I
the
get it.
attitude of I have the slides so I can miss and then watch the recording. I mean, when we interact, what I like about the interaction one is that you're able to ask me some questions, okay? And these questions tend to unlock certain things that are hidden in my subconscious, right? And then they come out. So you should buffer or pad according to the risk levels identified for the project or individual activities. In fact, with this thing that we're talking about here, you need to go to your RBS, which we call the risk breakdown structure. So we have the WBS, work breakdown structure. Is that not it? And then we have the risk breakdown structure. Now with the risk breakdown structure, it gives you exactly the the risk that you've identified, okay, within the project. So once you identify this risk, you'll be able to, depending also on your network diagram, okay, you know where the critical path is, you know where the floats are, so you know how to buffer your what? Your system. Remember we talked about the critical change method where buffers are added. You remember that we add resources and then buffers to the network diagram. So typically, if we want to do the contingency, we would have to resort to that type. Now look at it here. When we want to pad each activity cost estimate, after you've created your precedence diagram, which is the network diagram for the project, and estimated the activity duration and resources, you might realize that the project is very similar to some previous projects that you successfully completed. And so the risk associated with the project are low, and there's no critical pieces that need extra cost buffering. So in such a case, you might decide to pad each activity cost estimate by, let's say, 10% across the board. Okay. Now, Many organizations have a set policy that will determine the degree of buffering. That is true. To some organizations, you can give 20, some organization 10% is too much, maybe 5%. But it's all about coming out with your network diagramming, right? And then looking at areas where you know that there are possible risks that you are likely to encounter. And then you put up these buffers, okay? These buffers may be in terms of a resource buffer, okay? It could be a time buffer. All of them, whether it is time or resource, is related to cost. Do you get it? So that is the first one. Then the other example is where you pad high risk activities. So in the exams, you can be asked, okay, in what two ways can you perform a reserve analysis? Either you pad or add buffer to each cost estimate, or you add buffers to high risk activities. Okay, high risk activities tend to be on the critical path. So suppose you have identified activities on the critical path and need to give them extra protection. In this case, you would provide a higher cost buffer to these activities than other activities that are not on the critical path. So it is common for the critical path of a project to change during the course of a project. Therefore, it's safer to pad. When I say pad, it means add buffer. It's safer to pad high risk activities for cost overrun, regardless of whether they are on the critical path or not. As an example, you might be developing a non-critical component for a client. If the contract specifies a specific time, then you may want to utilize an extra cost buffer to ensure schedule crashing, if required, is possible. Remember, we talked about schedule compression techniques, fast tracking, and then what? Crashing. So crashing, I said, is when you are adding more resources, and that leads to an increased cost. And so we want to make room for that. So that anytime we would want to do that, there's a buffer for it. Alternatively, you may want to pad all activities by 10% and the high risk activities by what? 20%. So you see, this is how you can go about it. This is more practical, okay? Definitely within your industry and then the organization within which you find yourself and the projects that you tend to be performing. You know how to go about these. Okay. Further limit reconciliation. This is what I talked about initially. Okay, the technique that compares the funding available in each time period to the planned expenditure in that time period to ensure that the planned expenditure is within the available funding. PMI defines it as the process of comparing the planned expenditure of project funds against any limit on the commitment of funds for the project to identify any variances between the funding limit and then the planned expenditures. So there's usually a curve or graph for funding limit and then the planned expenditures, which we'll look at shortly. Now it involves the comparison and adjustment of the funding limit and the estimated cost by refining the scope and schedule of the project activities. So if we're going to do funding limit reconciliation, we should focus on refining the scope, is that not it, and the schedule of the project activities. What does it lead to? It usually leads to the revision of the schedule as well as the allocation of the resources. And therefore, the budget does not only impact the cost, but also the scope of work and then the schedule. So whenever we're doing that, like I said earlier, okay, we'll look at this, but this is the funding limit um, curve, which I will explain to you later. Okay. Now, Should there be any variances, what should we do? If there's any variance between the funding limit and the planned expenditure, you will sometimes need to reschedule the work to level out the rate of expenditures. We usually do this by placing the date constraint of particular work activity to the project schedule. Okay, so once we are doing funding limit requirement, we're also looking at the planned expenditure versus the funding limit. Let's look at a typical example here. If a project manager has outsourced part of a project and the vendor delivers the work in the first quarter, but payment was planned for in the second quarter, the project manager do not have any funds to pay for the services rendered by the vendor for the first quarter. Why? Because the project, he outsourced the thing to him, okay, and the work was done in the first quarter. But according to the plan, it was supposed to be paid in the second quarter. It means that you will not get money for that person. So the funding limit reconciliation is used to prevent the large variation in the expenditure of the funds for the project to allow the project manager to pay the vendor. Okay. The project manager should not wait till, that to happen. So you're going to take up some funds that will take care of all these. And so it has to be an agreement. At what point should you take money? If you plan for that one, you'll be able to, like this one that he finished in the first quarter, but it was supposed to be given in the second quarter. Because of how he planned his funding limit, there was money for this person. Otherwise, even if there's no money and there has to be a wait period, that variation should not be that much. That is what we are looking at. So let's look at this example here. The thick dark line, which is S in shape, is a cost baseline. The cost baseline is usually like an S, so it is called an S curve. You remember core math where we used to look at the cumulative frequency curve? You remember?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's a typical example. And you know that the cumulative frequency curve is also more like an S, and we call it an ogive. Now, here we're going to draw the cumulated values, okay? The cumulated values. So maybe week 1, it cost $1,000. Week 2, 2,000. So when we are drawing it, we're going to draw according to the cumulated values, which we'll look at shortly. Now, this one is just trying to tell us that supposing this is up to, let's say, the 4th month, and it will require, let's say, $2,000. What we are saying is that from the 1st month, 2nd month, 3rd month, certain things will be done and they all have their individual cost. But this $2,000 is able to take care of all the activities or the things that are supposed to be done, okay, around the 1st up to the 4th. So when we get to this point, we're going to spend up to this point, which is 2,000. If within the 4th to the 6th, let's assume that this is the 6th. Okay, we'll need an extra 2,000. So we would write for that extra $2,000 to be given, or let's say $500. to take care of the activities here. You get it now? And so it will continue till we are done. But if you look at our curve here, this is where our cost baseline ends. Have you seen it here? The BAC is budget at completion, the budgeted cost at completion. It means that by the end of the project, this is how much it is going to cost. Do you get it now? Okay. Now the management reserve lies at the head here. The project budget is over here, all right, but this is the management reserve. And maybe in the course of the project, that unknown occurred, and then we had to write for the management reserve to be used, and then we used it. So this is the cost baseline, and these are the expenditures. So when it gets to end value management, so when we get to this particular point here in end value management, we'll be looking at the cost baseline, okay, which is the planned cost. Then we'll be looking at what we actually have spent. Then we look at the variances as a result of our actual cost, which we'll look at shortly. So this is a typical example here with the figures. So you see that January, February, March up to what? April. So we're saying $300,000. $300,000 can take care of whatever we're going to do within the project up to this particular point. Okay. Now we would request for a release of, let's say, 1,000, maybe $150. Okay, so that we perform the activities from April to May. Then we make a request, and then we'll give you and all that. Okay, so usually the budgeted cost is what we call the cost baseline, which is this, and this is what you have done, the actual cost. So the variance will be the difference between the line, the blue line, and then the red line. It can be positive or negative. The diagram you have here is only telling us that we aggregated the work breakdown structure, okay, using the bottom-up approach, and then got the cumulated values. So these are cumulated values, okay. This is just a point to consider that the cost baseline is the expected cost of the project. It is used to measure performance. Other tools and techniques here, the historical relationships, refers to the parametric estimation which is used on what, or based on historical data. This will be implemented by factoring in the cost of project activities and multiplying them based on the ratio of this current activity. So these are other tools and techniques. So there's an example here. Then the expert judgment, I indicated earlier that you could have the certified cost professional and then financial analyst or the financial accountant, okay, to help do that. Okay, so this a typical exams question. An IT manager, Tom, is evaluating expenditure of funding limit reconciliation. He realizes that there is a variance between the funding limit and then the planned expenditure that needs to balance. How would you accomplish this if you were Tom? So just look at it carefully and then come out with an answer. Anyway, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please. I'm reading your question again.
Yeah. Okay. So which one is the answer according to, which one will you go for?
Either A or D, but I'm trying to think of which one. I think I'll go with D.
Okay. You are introducing the issue to the funding entity and request new funding limit. Okay. So let's see. Look at it here. You are evaluating expenditure, is that not it, of this one against what has been planned. And you realize that there's a variance. Okay. And you want to come across solve it. Now, submitting request of change to the change control board will not be a prudent option. The whole issue is about performance. You understand here? It's about performance. So you have to, first of all, look at why there is that problem. Do you get the point here? Why is it that there's a variance between your funding limit and then the planned expenditure? The funding entity, usually the sponsor, should be the last person that you want to consult in this matter. First of all, look at what is happening. So we will not take this. So we usually look at those ones that will not be done. If you want to submit a request of change, okay, then it means that probably there was an error in your calculations. Okay. Now, requesting for approval of a new schedule baseline is entirely wrong, because here it's not an issue of the schedule baseline. Okay. Let's go to C. Placing date constraint for work into the project schedule. Once there's a variance between the planned and then that which you have done, okay, then we have to go back and then look at what has to be done for us to make the balancing. Introducing the issue to the funding requirement entity and request new funding limit will also not be prudent. So placing date constraint for work into the project schedule in this particular context will be the right thing to do. Do you get how we look at it here?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's an IT project manager term is evaluating expenditure or funding limit reconciliation. He realizes that there is a variance between the funding limit and then the planned expenditure that needs to balance. So you have to, it's something you have to do. It is not balancing. When you go, they will not give you the money. I hope you get it now. They will not give you, management.
Yeah.
They will not give you, they will not give you the money. So these are things that you should look at. Okay. So whenever you pick a question, you have to analyze. And that is what makes the exams interesting. You are solving 200 questions in 4 hours. And each question is 1 hour, 20 minutes. 1 minute, 20 seconds. And so you need to think very, very fast. And look at the approach. You cross out the ones that are no-nos. The B is not correct at all. Okay, B is not correct at all. Then this one. Now, let me ask this question. Which process is this person in? Which process area? Which process group? What process is he performing now? Where do you think he is?
He is in the monitoring and controlling.
Very good, because the evaluation here. Do you get it? Aha. So you see this question.
Yeah.
This question. Other answers would have been, what process is this person in? Then the answers will follow. So the question that you asked earlier, the same preamble, but they can ask you what process the person was trying to perform. I hope you get it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the correct answer is C. We said that funding limit reconciliation is a tool and technique in determining budget process. Now, the expenditure of funds should be reconciled with any funding limit for the project. A variance between the funding limit and the planned expenditure will sometimes need the rescheduling of the work to level out the rate of expenditure. Let's go back to this. I think I stated it somewhere. Aha. It often leads to, do you get it? Here. Are you there with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. And then we said that in case of variance, what should you do? Between the funding limit and the plan and register, what will you do? You have to reschedule the work. And so if this is what we know, God willing, next week, we're going to look at every point and the decision that you have to take. Supposing there's an argument between the project team and then the stakeholders, as far as requirements are concerned, when you are judging an issue like this, who do you judge in favor of? We'll look at that. Okay. So when you know how to take these decisions, so right now you put it at the back of your mind that anytime there is a variance between the funding limit and the planned expenditure, you would want to what? Reschedule. Is that not it? And then the answer to the question is even here. This is done by what? Placing date constraint of a particular work activity. Are you okay now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so we are in the control cost process. That's the final process within cost management. So what is the project cost project control cycle? As far as cost is concerned, we always set a goal, is that not it? We try to measure our progress. We compare actual with what planned and then take action. And then if possible, recycle the process. So whether it is scheduling, whatever form, wherever we are within the project, whenever we are doing a control, usually that's what, excuse me, we do. We look at the goals that we've set, we track our progress, and then we compare actual versus planned, and then take the necessary actions where possible. So what does it include? We want to influence the factors that create changes to the authorized cost baseline. Remember, we don't want to change the cost baseline. So if there's anything that is doing that, we are trying to influence it. We're ensuring that all change requests are acted on in a timely manner. Okay. Managing the actual changes when and as they occur. Ensuring that cost expenditure do not exceed the authorized funding by period and in total for the project. Okay, if it is for within the first phase, we don't have to exceed it. Now, we need to monitor cost performance to isolate and understand variances from the approved cost baseline. And then we need to monitor work performance against what funds expended. what we really want to do is to prevent unapproved changes, from being included in the reported cost, and then acting to bring expected cost overruns within acceptable limit. Definitely, you may overrun your cost, but what we are saying is that there's an acceptable limit that you are given. So we try to work within that limit. What are the ITTOs as far as control cost is concerned? Project management plan, project document, project funding requirement, because we want to know, as far as the funding of the project is concerned, what are the requirements? Work performance data. Okay, so we are 20% into the project and we have spent 40%. That's a cost variance, right? It's negative. So that data will help us to know what to do. And then the OPAs, are there policies, procedures, and standards within the organization as far as cost control is concerned, sorry. So we have expert judgment here. When we are controlling costs, the EVPs and value professionals, okay, who are highly skilled in monitoring and controlling the cost of a particular project. There may be other monitoring and evaluation specialists too, okay, that you may fall on. Then we have data analysis. Of course, you analyze the data, like the work performance data, for instance, you have to analyze it. The repository for information and the management of information within the project, the PMIS. Then the two complete performance index. What is this basically saying? Okay, so we said that the cost performance index is typically looking at the way you are behaving with respect to the cost of the project. Okay, yes, so if we're talking about two complete performance index, we are saying that now where we are and with what we have achieved so far, whether we are making overruns or whether we are doing well, to where we intend to go, how are we going to conduct ourselves as far as this project is concerned to achieve our target? So we call that the two complete performance index. It is a tool that we are using at the control process, because you see, at that point, you may have noticed that you are far behind schedule, the cost. And so there has to be a way you're going to spend. This is the point where sometimes you have to call for a meeting and then discuss with them that, look, based on A, B, C, D, we're not going to get to where, I mean, we've been asked to, as far as the money is concerned. So if we're going to cut A, B, C, then we can get there. Or if we are going to work over time, but we are not going to take money because already we are behind budget. Once the team agrees and then work around this and then get it, at the end of the day, whatever they are due as a result of the project, they will get it. So you, the project manager, must have a meeting with your team to look at how you're going to perform to the target and then the requirement of the project. What are the output? We have WPIs, we have the cost forecasts. You see, once we do all these things, the two complete performance index, we are going to make a forecast of how we are going to do things, is that not it? And then the change requests, There are some situations where we need to make certain changes and or probably even ask for some monies. Okay, whatever it is, you need to go through the change request, and then we have the project document update and then project management plan update. Scenario-based questions on project cost control need to be expected in the exams. Okay, I always say one thing. See yourself as a project manager who is making decisions, and you are going to make decisions based on your know-hows, that is the knowledge of the knowledge areas. Okay, bearing in mind the ethics and then the social responsibility. If there's an issue and you need to take a decision, are you acting according to PMI code of conduct? That's the first thing you should ask yourself. And the next thing is that, which knowledge area do I find myself? And how does PMI expect me to behave at this particular point? And then the third one is, what process am I in? What are the tools and the techniques? What are the input and then what are the output? What is the next process after this process? What is the preceding process? Write these down, and then anytime you are preparing yourself, ask yourself those questions. And whenever you are answering questions, take yourself through this. You do this and you build what we call the unconscious competence. Okay, then when it gets to a question, you don't really have to think too much. What's the difference between planned value and end value? We planned that we're going to do this, it was going to cost us that. But at the moment, the reality on the ground is that this is how much it's going to cost us. Let me give you a typical example. You are at the foundation stage, you planned that the foundation was going to cost this amount because of the duration. Then the workers or the labor start digging. Remember, you scheduled that it was going to take, let's say 1 week. Let's assume that was going to be 1 week. Within 1 week, you're going to charge the labor, you pay for the labor, is that not? Maybe they have their daily or hourly rate. So you're going to multiply that by the duration that you're going to do the project. Then this is what happens. As you begin to dig, you come across a very solid rock underneath, which need to be removed. And so if you look at it carefully now, that is even going to delay the project by maybe a day or two. Do you get it? So now, if it is going to delay the project by a day or two, the laborers, they don't know anything like there was a rock there, so we should consider them. No, they have gone beyond their 5-day duration. So any extra, they are going to cost you, charge you. So the plan was maybe $100 by 5 days. That is $500. But because the thing went 2 days ahead, so making 7 days. Now the plan cost was 500, but the end value is going to be that one. So these are the things that you're going to look at. Then there's also another aspect of it. We plan that by the 6th month, if the project is 1 year and it costs $12,000 to perform this project, according to whatever we did to get that value. What we know is that by the 6th month, we should have spent $6,000. So that $6,000 is going to be a planned value. Now, if you have spent $8,000 by the 6th month, then that is going to be the end value. You understand? So you need to look at this carefully. So end value is the total of the budget allocated to each of the activities that have been completed at the point of time. we can compare the end value budget allocated for a specific period of time to the planned value, the total work of what? The total of the work planned to determine if the project is on track. If the planned value of a project is $340, then the total of all the work packages planned for the project is $340. End value management. This is a typical tool that is used in tracking the performance of the project. It integrates the scope, the time, and then the cost of the project. Okay. Now, when we're given a baseline, you can determine how well the project is meeting its goals. A typical end value plan in the cost management plan will include the following. You would have to define the WBS and point at which measurement of control account will be performed. Establish the end value measurement techniques. What are the weighted milestones? What are the fixed formulas that we're going to use and all that? Then we have to specify the end value management computation equations for determining the projected estimate at completion, forecast, and other tracking methodologies. So these are terminologies that we'll be coming across, and usually in the formula we use these acronyms. So PV is the planned value, EV is the end value, AC is the actual cost, budget at completion, the budgeted amount for the total work, estimate at completion, estimated amount at what completion. So we are looking at the expected total cost for the project. Then ETC, estimate to complete, estimated cost to finish all the remaining project work. Okay. Then variance at completion is that what are the project budget surplus or deficit at the end of the project. There's also another concept of what? The rate of performance. How are you performing? Here we are looking at the ratio, okay, of the actual work that is completed to the percentage of the planned work to have been completed at the time. Let's say you have completed 40% of the work at that particular time. But according to the plan, you should have completed 60% of the work. So you're going to divide the actual, which is the 40%, over the 60%. So you're going to get a value of less than 1. So if your RP value is less than 1, if RP is less than 1, it only tells us that we have a low performance rate. Is that not it? But if RP is greater than 1, then we have a high performance rate. If RP is equal to 1, what it means is that we are performing just as we are expected, but each one of them has its own issues. You may have a lower RP, not because you are underperforming, but some issues came up, and so they need to be investigated. If you have a higher RP, it may also probably mean that maybe, yes, you have done 60% of the work, but something has to be investigated, okay? Because maybe ideally, according to the nature of the project and past project, that value that you are getting is unrealistic. Maybe some corners have been cut. If RP is equal to 1, what it means is that in case of any uncertainty right now, your project is going to run in that red zone of risk. So all these values have their own interpretations based on when and how or what. So that's what we should look at. This is a typical illustration for N value. So we have our original spending plan. Okay, so this is it, the balance at completion. So the PV here is the plan value. According to the original plan, the project should move from this point to this point. Okay, let me use this one here. The project should move from here to here. So at this point, you see that you are halfway in between the project. So from this point to this point, in terms of cost, this is the actual cost. So actual spending plan, this is your actual spending plan. So look at it, that here. Now, the forecast spending plan is this. That is estimate to complete and then estimate at completion. What this means is that by the time this project ends, you would have spent this amount. So if we are dealing with variance at completion, okay, if I draw a line from here to here, if it is EAC and this is BAC, then by the time I finish this project, this will be the variance at completion. Is that not it? Hey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So this is the estimated cost to complete. So we needed, if this whole thing was 60,000, by now we should have spent 30,000 here, and then we'll need 30,000 to finish. But looking at where we are now, if let's say we have spent 40,000, you will spend more, is that not it, to complete this project. The remaining 20,000 will take us to this part, but we have not finished. Have you seen? So what it means is that there will be a certain variance. So this is how it can be illustrated. So this is the formula. This is the formula. Look at it. Variance at completion. From what we have here, you see balance at completion, estimate at completion. And we said that is variance at what? Completion. Is that not it? Variance at completion. So from here, oh, come on. Let me go back. From here, we see that variance at completion is balance at completion minus what? Estimate at what? Completion. Okay, the amount of the project will be over budget or under budget. So if you get a negative value, it means that you are under over budget. Positive means you are under budget. So let's look at this. Cost variance. Your end value minus the end value and then the actual cost. Okay, end value, actual cost. You are in the 6th month, the project is 1 year old. The end value is that you should have spent, if it is a 12,000 cedis project, you should have spent 6,000 cedis. But you have spent, let's say, 8,000. So that is the actual cost. So what it means is that when we subtract that from you, we have that cost variance. Schedule variance, end value minus what? Plan value. Then cost performance index. Now, you see that when we talk about cost variance, it is the end value minus the actual cost. But when we are looking at the performance index, you compare the end value over the actual cost. So the formula, you just have to turn this minus into a slash. The same way with schedule performance index. If you look at the schedule variance, it is end value minus what? Plan value. But with a performance index, an index is a ratio. So it is EV divided by what? PV. Now, the estimate at completion is looked at in 4 scenarios. We have balance at completion divided by the cost performance index. Work performed at current cost performance index. What it means here is that if we want to estimate the budgeted cost at completion by the way we are working, then this is the formula we use. So in the exams, when you are solving an EAC question, the first thing you would have to ask yourself is, are the people working at the same CPI? The way they are spending money, is this how they are going to spend money for the rest of the project? If that is how they are going to spend, do you get it? If the way they are performing, if that is how they are going to perform, then this is how you're going to look at it. But if we are going to now look at the rest of the project at the budgeted rate, this is what it means. We know we are behind schedule, but then we are going to perform the rest of the project according to how we should have performed. The first one is performing at the way we are performing now. We are not changing anything. The second one is, look, we are behind schedule. So now we are going to change our ways and work according to, is that not it? The way the project was budgeted. So we're going to use this formula. Then this particular formula here, let me come in here. I'm coming. Let me do this for you right now. Okay, I want to remove this from there so that it doesn't confuse you. Good. So here we are saying that when we want to take into consideration our cost performance index and the schedule performance index, how we are performing according to the money or the cost and how we are performing according to the schedule. If we are going to take both of them into consideration, then when we are determining our estimate at completion, this is the formula we will use. Now, when we are re-evaluating based on the forecast value of the estimate to complete, we have estimated that this is how much it's going to cost us. So now we are going to re-evaluate based on that forecast. Then this is the formula we're going to use. So apart from estimate at completion and then the 2 complete performance indices, if you look at index, if you look at it here, they are the ones that you would have to look at the scenario before you use a formula. You take a particular question, look at the scenario, then you use the formula. Otherwise, what you're going to use may be intended for this one. You get the point here. And as an examiner, what I'll do is that, because I know you can use how many approaches? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many answer options do you have? 4. If I use the first one, the answer will be there. The second one, the answer will be the third one, the fourth one. So A, B, C, D. So whichever formula that you use, your answer will be there. So you think that's right. But only one of them is right. So please note that the estimate at completion and then the 2 complete performance index. Estimate to complete is just the what? EAC minus actual cost. if we go back to our schedule here, EAC minus actual cost, you see, that is the estimate to complete from here to here. That is it. Then variance at completion, we looked at it. Then the two complete performance index. The first one is for managing according to the budget that we have. Okay, the budget that we have, this is the budget that we have. We want to estimate according to that. Then, if we have calculated for a certain estimate at completion, that the way we are going, this is how much the project is going to cost us eventually. Then the two complete performance index, which is how are we going to behave such that we're able to achieve our target, will be calculated based on that. Henry, are you there? Hello? Hello, Henry? Okay. Okay, so let's proceed. So this is a graphical representation of the end value management. Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the graphical representation here. So the thick line here is the cost baseline. Okay, that's the cost baseline. And then the lines up and down here are telling us, you see that one on top here is the actual cost. Okay, then we have the budgeted cost for work performed. Okay, so we have our schedule baseline. Okay, and then we have our we have the schedule variance, and then we have the cost variance. Okay, we should also expect questions of such nature. Okay, where is the cost variance? Where is the schedule variance? Okay, always the difference between the actual cost and the planned is the cost variance, and then the difference between the planned and then the what we are performing now is the schedule variance. Okay, so there's a business scenario question here. Cynthia is a subject matter expert and director of the store renovation department. Because of expertise and experience in managing storm remodels for the corporation, she and her team are the go-to people for managing for many projects. Daniel is the project manager for one of the stores in the Southeast region. Because of the age of the store, it has been classified as a Tier 1 remodel, meaning it requires more work and a higher budget allocation. Donnell has a budget of $850,000 to complete the entire schedule that has been defined for the project. At the 30% mark of work completed on the project, her team has spent $310K. What does this tell Daniel about the status of the project and what should he do? The question is, the project is budgeted at $850,000. So 30% of 850,000 will be what? You would want to compare that to what has actually been spent. Okay, good. So 30% of 850 is going to be 255,000K, yet they've spent 310K. Then the CPI, which is the cost performance index, is going to be the end value, which is the 255, all over the actual value, which is the actual cost, which is 310. And that gives us a CPI of 0.82, meaning they are spending way above budget. Okay. Now, Daniel is concerned, especially as the project has not yet made it into the halfway mark. His previous tier 1 remodels had a better cost performance index at this point in the project. The project has faced some unexpected events. In other words, there are some unknown unknowns which the team had neither planned for nor anticipated based on past performance. The money allocated in the management reserve is able to cover most of the expenses, but not all. Now, after evaluating the root cause of these risk factors, Daniel is able to link the problems to the age of the store and the fact that none of the previous stores completed in the remodel initiative were as old. So Daniel is asked to reassess the risk and collaborate with their structural engineer to reevaluate the remaining activities so he can determine a revised budget and an estimate of what is needed to complete remaining activities based on the new information. So this typical example, okay? A software development project has 4 phases. Each phase takes a month to complete and is estimated to cost 10,000 per phase. The phases are planned to be completed one after the other. Given the project status at the end of 3 months, calculates the cost variance, schedule variance, CPI, and then the SPI. So that's the data that we've been given, okay? And of course, we're looking at the activity dependence over here. We have the start to finish and all that. So we have the start to partially finish and all that here. Okay. So this is the calculation of it and then the interpretation of the answers. Okay. So there's another example which we can look at. This also another example. So all these are examples that we can look at and then solve. If we look at this one, this example, John is managing a 3-month project to enhance a financial system. He's working on his EVM analysis to report to management on status of project. Calculates the following based on the given information. John wants to see if the positive SPI of the project will offset the CPI. So he decides to rerun his EAC calculations. How can he incorporate both CPI and SPI? So here the question is telling us that the EAC is calculated based on CPI and SPI. So that one will use this formula. Okay. These are the key terms that we should look at. The law of diminishing returns. The more you put into something, the less you get out of it. Okay. The working capital, the amount of money the company has to invest on the project and the day-to-day company operations. Then funding limit reconciliation, the process of comparing the planned expenditure in a given period with the available funding for that period. Depreciation, straight line depreciation. Okay. So let's look at the large asset purchased by the company lose value over time. So the 2 forms of depreciation are the straight line depreciation and the accelerated one. What's the difference here? The same amount of depreciation is provided for every year, for the asset. So for example, a car with a price tag of 10,000 and a useful life of 10 years is depreciated by 1,000 every year. This is an accounting terminology. Then we have accelerated depreciation. The asset depreciates faster than the straight line one. So here we're looking at a car with a price tag of 10,000 but depreciates at 3,000 the first year, 1,500 the second year, and 1,000 the third year. These are areas that the finance gurus do. So you as a project manager, you don't really do that unless maybe you are a finance person. Okay, so key takeaways here. Project cost management includes the processes involved in estimating, budgeting, and controlling costs so that the project can be completed within the approved budget. Cost management plan contains details on how to plan, manage, and control the project cost in relation to the cost baseline and manage the cost variances. Cost estimate is an educated guess of how much an activity or a project will cost. Nonetheless, the budget considers the cost estimate and accordingly set aside funds for the completion of the project. Under control account technique, related activities are clubbed and their costs are managed as one unit. The 4 project cost management processes are plan cost management, estimate cost, determine budget, all 3 within the planning process group, and control cost, which is in the monitoring and control process group. Now, EVM technique indicates potential deviation of the project work from the cost or schedule baselines. Okay, so as usual, we'll have the knowledge check in our online question bank so that we'll be able to answer the questions there. However, when you go through the slides, all these are available, okay? So here you have to calculate the cost variance. To calculate the cost variance, knowing the end value and then the actual cost, what should we do? Exactly. Cost variance is end value minus actual cost. So 550 minus 650 gives us a minus of 100. So exactly, answer A is right. Okay, so we'll end here, okay, and I'll add or put the other questions on the platform for you to answer. I wish you guys all the best. Our next topic is going to be the project stakeholder management. Thank you.